Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to show you some things that I picked up from Michael's and Hobby Lobby. I wanted to try the golden paint and I wasn't sure where to start, so I picked up these 10 fluid, it's a pack of 10 colors. Trying to see what the fluid paints are all about. I have some of the heavy bodied acrylic paints from Golden, and they're not as translucent, I guess, because they're so thick, and I guess they behave a little bit differently. And I wanted to see, I've seen a lot more people using the fluid golden acrylics for the gel plate, so I wanted to test them out for myself, and also for those of you that don't have any golden acrylic paints, fluid acrylic paints, just to see if this is something that you even want to try for yourself. These are not the cheapest paints. Buying them in a set like this, I feel like maybe that was a better deal, but even this pack of 10 paints was $75. I got mine from Michael's. I did use a coupon, so I got 30% off. And I did buy this turquoise phthalo as a separate paint. It did not come in the set. So they did have some freestanding golden fluid paints that you could pick and choose different colors from. I also wanted to try Amsterdam. I decided to go with the copper and these pearl colors. They have a little bit of a different tone, some white, yellow, red, blue, violet, and green tone to these. They do all look white when you look at them, but then when you hold them up to the light, you can see the different colors shine that they let off. I'm curious to see how these compare to some of the other pearlized paints that I have. So I'll test some of those out. To open these, the one that I bought by itself, that one opened up pretty easily, and I was able to get the metallic foil thing on the top off and the plastic underneath it, but this is a little bit of a messy job. So the paint was already getting everywhere. So after using some baby wipes, and I had to use a craft knife for all the ones that came in that pack of 10, because the plastic wasn't coming up with the foil when I peeled the foil off. So this part, I would say, was probably the messiest part, was just getting all of them opened. So I did have a lot of baby wipes and a towel here that I was using to minimize the paint from getting everywhere. So once I had all my caps back on my paints, and I put them in the order that they kind of went next to each other. So here are my colors, and you can see from the paint on the front, a lot of them are a little more transparent. The black does look like it would be opaque. The white is more of a transparent white. And I'd say the darkest one is maybe the phthalo blue red shade, and perhaps the magenta. But I'm excited to see how these perform layering on top of each other. So this is my Hobby Lobby haul. I got these acrylic markers that are pigment based, and typically when I see markers that are acrylics, they are the kind that you have to shake and kind of press down before any of the color will come out. These are different. So these have the color already flowing into the tip. It's a brush tip, and they work really nice. I am going to try these in a different video on the gel plate, but I did want to show you that they have these, and I hadn't even, I guess, looked for a paint marker like this that has the paint already flowing. They do blend into each other a little bit. I could probably get them to work a little bit better if I had a nicer paper. That was just copy paper, and then here I have some black cardstock, I did want to see if they would hold up well to the black paper. I just zoomed in here a little bit so you can see it does take a couple of passes to get the color more vibrant. So the first time around it's not very bright, but each pass around it gets brighter. Then I wanted to see if I put a color on top of it, if I could get a little bit of variation. I did some dots for the center of the flower and then just some lines in each petal. Can't see the pink all that well, and the paper did start pilling a little bit. Again, maybe mixed media or watercolor paper or some kind of a thicker paper would be better to do the layers for these paint pens. And I don't know how well I could get these to blend with each other, but I did also want to test the white on the black. Again, it took 2 to 3 passes to really see that white. These are a little bit unique to me. They remind me more of like Tim Holtz paint pens. Like this one reminds me of like the picket fence, if you're familiar with his markers or pens. I'm trying it out here to see if I can highlight on this lettering. It does show the white, but it does bleed into the color, so it's not like a gel pen after it dries. It's a little more faded into the color that's below it. So next I got these. I needed some more fine line pens, and I hadn't tried these before. These are Paper Studio. That's the brand that Hobby Lobby sells, and they have 3 sizes of their nibs. So this is a 0.5 millimeter. This one's the 0.1 millimeter. So this will be the finest point. And then there's a 0.3 millimeter. This is the size right in between the two. And then I'm going to just do a line of each. This was the 0.3. This was the 0.1. And then this one was the fattest point, the 0.5. So they work really well. I'm pleased with those. And then I got these gold and silver paint pens. These are from Pilot. I don't think I've seen these before. Or they've probably been there, but I've never tried them before. So these are the kind that you want to shake, press down, and then draw with them afterwards. So I just shook those both up, and I'm just going to do a little test on the white paper and on the black paper to see how they look. I ran out of ink in my other gold pen that I had gotten, so I wanted a replacement. I will warn you, these are very fine tipped. So I think I was hoping for a medium tip, and it wasn't quite as fat as I was hoping for, but then I thought this might be really good for some fine details. They make really good dots, really nice fine lines. These are really good for doodling. So this is what it looks like on the black paper. Some of the other gold pens, they dry out fast for me, so I will be curious to see how quickly these dry out or if they last a decent amount of time. That's the trouble I have with the paint pens that are metallics. Next, I'm going to try the silver and see how this one looks. can't really tell from this angle, but the silver was, both of them were really vibrant and they stood out really well on the paper when you had it in the light. So I'll put it at an angle and then you'll be able to see how much they shine. They are very metallic, like not one of those like they fade into the background kind of metal. They look like metal when they're dried. Very, very shiny. So there's the gold and the silver next to each other on the black, and you can see here the gold and the silver on the white background paper. Next, I wanted to test out this rice paper from Hobby Lobby. It says it's good for calligraphy, sketching, watercolor. Might have to try that, but for the time being, I'm going to test it on my Gelli plate. It's a pretty decent sized roll. I like the fact that it's a roll because I can make pages a little more precise to what size gel plate I'm working with. For today, I'm going to be working on my 8x10 gel plate. One side of this paper is a little more smooth and one side of the paper feels a little more rugged, more like paper, like has a texture, but I don't know how to describe it. Maybe like softer. So I didn't know how to cut this because it doesn't fit into my paper cutter. So I pulled out my sewing board. I have a little Fiskars cutting roller and my board that I use to really cut out fabric. And so I decided to try cutting it out this way. I really wanted a nice straight line and I liked that I could measure them. And again, the size I'm going with is the 8x10 gel plate. So I am using my ruler to see where I would get the best size to fit on that gel plate. If you don't mind it not being too precise, you can use your scissors. I did end up using my scissors to cut some extra pages after I did this, but I did want to test it out and see if I could get some nice cuts, smooth cuts from using my rotary blade. And I was pleased with both. The scissors, they did, the cuts were a little more uneven. It was harder, but I guess if I had drawn a line and then cut along it, that would be fine too. I didn't really know where to start, so I decided to use my gold paint pen and just trace the design on my desk, the little hexagons, through the gel plate. And I'm being careful not to press down into the gel plate because I don't want to ruin it. So whenever I need a little more ink, I am pressing it out on a scrap piece of paper. And then for the little dots, I am pressing down very lightly. And some of them I was able to just shake out after I depressed it, and there was a little extra paint. I did let the gold dry before I went in with some color. I'm gonna just test out the turquoise color first. I don't know how much I need to use of this fluid acrylic, so I'm just testing out a little bit and seeing how that holds up. As I am brayering out the color here and I go over it, I can see that it's just erasing it. So that's different for me. I went in with a little bit of green on top of that. I'm just going to mix in a few different colors, mostly in the green and yellow category, just sticking with colors that will blend well together. Once I brayered that out, I wanted to use a stencil on top. I'm going to use, this is PM Artist Studio Chaotic Mesh stencil, and I'm using some rice paper to pull up what's in between the stencil. I'm just kind of rubbing in. You can really see the stencil through the rice paper, which makes it nice, and I'm just trying to pull up as much of that paint as I can. And now I was deciding if I was going to pull up the stencil or just put paint on top. I decided to just put some paint on top. I'm going to start with this blue on the top here. I did notice the paint didn't want to blend out too easily. So I just took some more rice paper to remove some of that paint. And then I used a little bit of a different color blue on the bottom part. And removed some of it using that same rice paper. Then I removed my stencil. At this point, I let what was on the gel plate dry before I added in the other colors on top. For this first play session, I didn't use any white with my colors. And I am noticing that the colors are very, very vibrant. And they blend really well together. You can see the translucent quality that they have because I can see what was underneath the green on top. I'm just using my B stamp, also from PM Artist Studio. And I'm putting rice paper down. I could have let it dry to the paper just a little bit longer and I might have gotten more of it up, but now I was able to get a second print because of what was left on the plate. You can see the little gold hexagons, just faint. Now I'm going to use the Amsterdam Pearl in the kind of goldish color. I'm just going to pull the rest of what's on the gel plate with this paint. At this point, I'm still not really sure if this was the best application to test out these golden paints because, again, I hear such high reviews of them that they work really well. They're fluid. I guess the fluid nature of them, they have some really cool things that happen on the gel plate. I don't think this was showing me the best thing that they could be doing. So this was with the pearl color behind it. And then this was the one with just on rice paper. The second one I had pulled, it was on copy paper. So first one was rice paper, second one was copy paper, and it just cleaned off what was left on the plate. For my next test, I decided I didn't want to ruin my stencils while I was experimenting and practicing, and I kind of wanted to see, what would happen if I tried something different. So I cut out some of these paper flowers that I just had a free design from Silhouette Studio. I use the Cameo machine, and every week they give out a free SVG file. So this was just one of the freebies I had in my library, and I cut out 3 sizes and just went ahead and cut them on 110-pound cardstock. This mat was very sticky. It was a new mat, so to take the paper off, I just kind of folded the mat back, just so I wouldn't tear the paper in case I wanted to use the outside part of these as a stencil. Now to get the flowers off, because this mat is so sticky, I just used my spatula and just carefully pulled up all the little delicate pieces. And you do want to be careful here. You don't want to tug on it because these have such thin lines that it would definitely break if I wasn't being careful. And I think that turned out really nice. I didn't rip it at all, so I was happy. And I just went ahead and got the other two off of the mat. Next, I'm pulling out my 8x10 gel plate to test out some more ways to use these golden fluid paints. For this print, I'm going to use some white and see if I can brighten up those colors a little bit. I'm going to use primary colors first. I'm using the magenta, the blue, phthalo blue red, and then the yellow medium. I'm using my small brayer, and I'm going to just blend out the colors. I'm making a little bit of green with the blue and the yellow, and then I'm going to do more of like the pinks and purples towards the center where the flowers might be. At this point, I can start to see that the paints are giving this lacy texture that I have heard people describe what happens on the gel plate with these types of paints. So it's creating these little bubbles or holes in the paint, and I guess we'll call it lace. So it's given some lace. Now if the paint is too thick, it's not going to do that, so it does have to be fairly thin for that to happen. I'm just putting my 3 stencils down. And what this is going to do, so because these are paper stencils, the paint is going to be removed completely by both the rice paper that I'm putting down right now and the stencil. So all that I will be left with is just an outline of these flowers. So if you had the flower made out of a plastic, it would still keep the flower design behind it. So that's the difference between working with a paper stencil and a plastic stencil. So the print did get a lot of ink on my hand pulling through the rice paper. Then I'm carefully removing my stencils. The stencils ended up looking pretty cool with the paint. But again, you can see that they are just leaving behind the outline of the flowers. But I thought that that was a pretty cool start. I dried what was left on the plate because now I'm going to layer on top of it. I'm using white again, and I'm going to focus on the pinks and purples in the middle, the greens on the outsides of the flowers. And using that same technique as earlier, I'm just blending out the colors. I cleaned off my brayer before I went into the green and yellow mixture, trying not to contaminate the colors because I don't want to do a brown color right now, not at this point. I had seen someone spritz alcohol, rubbing alcohol on their fluid paints, and I don't know if that does anything. So I went ahead and spritzed some on there. I'm experimenting right now, so this is just me seeing what happens with what. And I have this stamp. This is the Peculiar Pebbles, also from PM Artist Studio. I wanted a little bit of texture behind the flowers because I was planning to put some of that copper behind them, but I didn't want to remove the paint. So I'm just pressing lightly just to remove a little bit of texture, but not trying to remove the paint onto the paper. Then I wanted to add a little more texture using this little mesh screen that I have. And now I'm going to dry the entire thing so that it's completely dry before I add my next layer. At this point, I wasn't sure if it was totally dry, so I used just a piece of rice paper to test it out. There was just a little bit of wet paint at the bottom, but the rest was all dry. So this is the Amsterdam copper. And I'm using copy paper to pull this print. I will let this paint dry to the paper for about 2 minutes before I pull it. So this is looking really nice. Again, these colors are so vibrant from the golden, and having the white mixed in really makes those colors pop even more. It gives a little more variation to the colors than using them without the white. So I really do like having the white. It's a little hard to see the flowers because they were just the outlines of the flowers. So I'm going to do another print, and this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm putting my flowers back onto the gel plate before I have anything else on my gel plate. And now I want to have a little more control over where the paint is going to go. So I am going to apply it using a paintbrush. And I'm introducing some of this other color of red and mixing it with my magenta and the white. And I'm just it looks like a coral color, but it's going to help me have a little more variation in my petals. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in all my petals using this technique. And as I'm filling in these petals, the paint is doing that separation. So you can see that first petal, almost all of the pink separated and had those strokes, brush strokes in them. At first I was trying to cover up the brush strokes as those holes were happening, but then I had this idea that I might let those stay and see what I could do with them after they dry. So my first flower, I'm just kind of filling it in. Some of the petals I filled in again, and then the paint stayed and didn't make those little holes. So it's just, right now I'm practicing playing with what works and what I like and what characteristics of this paint I can use to my advantage. This is usually how I come up with ideas, is just by playing around with the way things work and getting ideas from what is happening on the plate and what I could use to make something look really cool. I like that I can mix the paints doing it this way. I also like that I get these cool looking brush strokes by doing it this way. So it's not the brayered out look, it's a little more intentional. So once I finished the colorful flower part, I washed my brush with water, and my brush was still a little bit wet when I went in with the yellow, so it made this kind of wonky looking yellow in the circles, but that was okay because I had this idea at this point. I wanted to dry this layer completely before I pulled off my stencils. And then I wanted to go in with the pearl powders. So I have one of the Perfect Pearls in purple, and then the other two are mica powders. And I just want to go over all of those petals that had like the separating paint in them, and I wanted to use this to kind of make them shine. So this is a test to see how this would look. Once I blended all my petals out, I went in with some of my copper Perfect Pearl and went over the little stamen in the centers. Then I carefully removed my stencils. And now I'm going to put just a little bit of paint around where the flower parts are. So I'm using yellow in the center, little white and red and magenta. Actually, no, just the white and the red on the outer part of the flower. You're not really going to see this color right behind the flower because it's got the pearls in there. But what I wanted to do was give a little bit of a messy edge to the outside of the flower and to any of the little lines that were kind of separating the petals. So that's where you're going to see this color. And I'm still trying to stick with the shape of the flower petals. Next, I'm letting this layer dry completely. I'm using my blow dryer on a cool setting to speed up the drying time. And it does help speed it up a lot. Now I'm going to go in with the blues and the greens on the outside, and this time if I go over the petals, it shouldn't really matter because it's going to be behind those flowers. I'm mixing in some green, some yellow, and some turquoise. And there's white dots in there too to blend white into this background area. I do have a little bit of the blue in the corner here too, on this side. think these colors are looking really nice together. The green and the blue really pop against the kind of corally red and pink color. Once I finish adding this paint to the outside part, I wanted to add a little texture that looked like leaves, so I had made this texture plate just out of Dollar Tree wooden leaves that I got in the Crafter Square section, and I hot glued them to just a piece of cardboard, and then that way I'm able to use them as like a stamp. There's 3 or 4 different leaf shapes on here, so I'm just kind of picking the different leaf designs and pressing those down until I'm happy with how that looks. I'll also add in, I dried it a little bit, but I didn't dry it all the way at this point because I wanted to add a little more texture. I didn't show it on camera, but I stopped blow drying and used my mesh, and I got a little bit of mesh out of the green areas before I put this silver paint down. And this one I did leave to dry for maybe 2.5 minutes. This print made me say wow when I pulled it. I was definitely very happy with the colors and how the pearls really made those petals pop. And I just thought it made those kind of brush strokes, bubbly brush strokes look so cool. So I was really happy with that print. So I'm going to go over the prints that I made with my print session this time. So these were my 2 beginner prints, learning to use the golden paints. Not that great, probably can use them for something. Here's my rice paper and no white, so just colors, the primary colors that I mixed here. This has white mixed with my primary colors and a little bit of the design of the flower outlines and some copper in the background. And then my final print, which looks like a painting to me, and this has the really pretty blooms and it pops off the green and blue background. So I think that this was a really cool experiment, and as with most of my gel printing sessions, I typically like my later gel prints more than my earlier gel prints because I'm learning. So every time I do a gel print session, if I'm not happy with what I'm getting, I don't let that stop me from testing out some other things that I think would look cool. And if they don't, they don't, but sometimes they turn out really neat, like how these flowers turned out. So if you've enjoyed this print session, let me know what you've learned from working with golden paints, the fluid acrylics. Is there anything else I should be trying with these that these do particularly different than other paints? I noticed they do the bubbling thing or the lacy thing, but I'm not sure because I haven't played with them enough yet what else to expect with these or how else best to use them. So let me know if you have any suggestions for me as I'm learning. So thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed watching my progression of learning to use these paints on the gel plate. And I will hopefully see you in the next video. I do have an Etsy shop that I'm adding some of my prints to. If you're interested in that, I am adding this print to my Etsy shop because I like this one a lot. And yeah, you can check it out if you're interested. All right, happy crafting.